Yeah. So you're sort of reminding me of, there was a time when I was chair of a Key Stage 4 pupil referral unit, um, and we had the most fabulous head teacher. I mean, she was a Greenham Common baby, for those that remember Greenham Common. She really understood, life and people, and community. And we resolved to turn it into a restorative school, which over 2 years we did. We made a lot of changes, and it had such a profound impact on I mean, mostly boys. We had 50 places, mostly boys, mostly black boys, um, who were either on the periphery of or within the criminal justice system. And, one of the things I learned, you know, that really kind of, as I said, about contextualizing, you can pull someone out and say, you've got a knife on you and therefore we punish you in this way. But, or you're dealing drugs, but some of those boys were parenting their mothers. They were parenting their mothers who were so up to here, up to their necks in sort of, gang life or whatever they were involved in that couldn't get out. And so they saw themselves as contributing towards the electricity bill. I mean, really basic stuff. So those for me are, yes, then there's a net result of a crime has been committed, but it sits in a huge social context which we're just not talking about.
Absolutely. I mean, that's exactly what I always say to people. The criminal justice system is a very blunt tool that has to deal with issues that really are so much deeper
Mhm.
than just somebody committing a crime. And really, and in fact, I was talking to some of the young people that I teach this week, knowing that I was coming here today, and I actually was asking them what their opinion of the criminal justice system was. And first of all, it made me reflect so much, which I always think anyway, but that, when it comes down to it, most of the problems that people are facing coming to the criminal justice system are ones of, lack of housing, lack of jobs, don't have enough money, all of these things, mental health issues, trauma, um, and the inability to resolve
Well,
conflict.
that's my bag,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And that is so interesting because I've always thought that I always think about my job being 50% of the people come through the criminal justice system are people that have an issue with resolving
Mm,
conflict. And so whether it's domestic related
mm,
or kind of in the community, having fights with knives, etc., so much of it is the inability to resolve conflict in a healthy way. And when you think about when I just think about the people in my life that I'm quite close to, how many people, when you think of friends or family, how
mm.
many people actually can resolve conflict in a really healthy way? It's quite rare that you find people that can resolve conflict, whatever class or background you come from. So, let alone the people who are the most disadvantaged. So, but coming back to what the young people said to me was, first of all, one of my young people said they didn't really know what was going on when they came
Mhm.
to court, and most of it was being done behind closed doors, which I thought was quite interesting because that's not necessarily the case, but that was the
Yeah.
perception that most of it's being done behind closed doors, and they kind of just come in and they're just told what to do and they do it and then they go home. So I think there's a real problem with lack of real understanding, but I think it's because, like you were talking about, the language,
Mhm.
just everything being done so quickly and so rushed. People are rushed into court. You might get, quick conference with your lawyer. You're being told all this information very, very quickly, rushed into court. And there's just very little time to do things properly. And so that people, and that's the same with adults as well as young people, but it's just the same process of everything being so rushed and so last minute. And then another young person saying that they felt that as soon as they had that first interaction with the police, then that set off a snowball effect of like social services being involved in the family. That could lead them then being put into care. Being put into care then led them to becoming more involved in criminal activity, and it just going on and on from there. So it's almost like this sense of as soon as you have that first interaction with the police, it's kind of game over because then you are in the system. That's how
Mm.
he described it. You're then in the system, and that system has a hugely negative impact. Um, and then speaking to a youth worker as well, they were just saying that because we both agreed that seems the only thing that will help a young person stop being involved, as we were talking about before, the serious criminality that young people are kind of being dragged into because of their circumstance, and because often they are acting under duress or being exploited by older people, that they just have no option but to carry on doing what they're doing. Not necessarily that they're being forced. They are often going into criminal activity willingly, but like you said, because they need money, because they want to help their families, because they have no hope. They've got no hope of getting a job. They just don't feel that they're invested in their community. It doesn't feel like they've got something to work towards. So the only way that you can get a young person out of that is to remove them from their environment.
Yes.
So they will finally get what's known as remanded to the care of the local authority, which is not being remanded into detention or custody, but it's kind of you're being put into the care of the local authority. Then they can move that young person. So then they will be taken out of, say, Woolwich, put into, could be anywhere, you know, it could just be North London, so it could be Enfield, or it could be further out, say, Dagenham. And once they're removed, but they are then put into a care home where there is a lot of support. That is often a one-to-one support. So they are suddenly getting all this intervention, they're being given activities, and it's hugely expensive because there are very few state providers, which again, I think, you know, I'm a big believer in state provision because I think it's usually cheaper, and I think there are much better standards and regulations around state providers. But, you know, as in so many areas in life now, everything has been privatised. The local authorities are having to pay huge amounts of money to place these young people, often, as I said, on a one-to-one basis with maybe 2 or 3 24-hour, 24/7 care. But often those placements do work because they are having such close interaction with professionals who are able to properly interact with them and look after their needs, and they're given meaningful activities to do. But that does also mean them being taken out of their communities, away from family, away from friends, which, you know, is a, you know, on the one hand, it's a good because they're being
trade-off, isn't it?
Well, it is, and they're being moved away from people that are perhaps getting them into trouble. But at the same time, there would be other friends or family members who they are also being taken away from. And most of the young people don't want to go. And once they're there, they don't want to be there. That's the reality. But quite often, once they are there, they will stop committing crime. And bit by bit by bit, I think they often will say, actually, well, you know, it's kind of like having my own place. And then once they turn 18, they'll then be moved into a semi-independent place. And sometimes it can work quite well. I'm not saying that that's, you know, the only solution. It's a shame we don't have better community solutions that could keep a young person where they are. But there certainly seems to be this one solution that does seem to work, although it's hugely expensive.